Hey everyone, just going to walk through the pole banners Adobe Dimension document just in case it's helpful to have a look at how to work with this and how to get your panels set up. And if you've checked out the previous Adobe Dimension tutorials I've posted for you in Canvas, so a couple weeks back by now, you'll be able to, even in the instruction you find in those videos, you'll be able to do what's going to be done here essentially. But just in case, I'll talk specifically about the pole banner file and in case it's helpful. So one of the things to do is to be sure that you go in and select your object here. Now the first thing I want to do, I'm going to probably zoom this out a little bit or change my camera, move this thing up a little, get my view a little bit different. Got to move it around in the space a little bit. I kind of want to get it to a perspective to where it's going to be where it would be as if I was viewing it myself, essentially. I might move it here. Now, if I go to move it, be sure that you go through and select this thing. And you might have to, it gets a little weird here, I might have to hit unlock, which is going to probably lock other things. So let me just double check here, because there might be some pieces, if you've tried to move this thing, that are not, they may not be grouped. So make sure you go through, and I'm just double checking here to make sure that everything is grouped. And then what you want to do is, you'll notice if you update dimension, even from prior videos, the tools are essentially the same, but they move around in terms of where they are. So they're constantly updating that. So instead of having your select tool, you want to make sure that you have your move tool here. And I'm going to go ahead and move that a little bit off, so I can see it from a different angle. And I'll probably, put it over in this area. I might, change this so it's a little bit closer. Maybe I want to go ahead and move this to where it's on that grid exactly. Let me see here. Get this on the grid here, essentially. And on a laptop, the mouse can be, I feel like I have a claw for a hand sometimes. So you get it to a place that you feel good about. I'm going to also go ahead and copy this. I'm going to move it along the same axis point. I'm going to hold Option. Actually, let me do that again. Move this back here. The thing that's a little bit annoying I've been finding is that the undo function in Dimension can be a little bit cumbersome. So when I go to move this, if I hold Option, theoretically I can click and drag one out, just so to get another one, a little clearer sense of the space that we're working in. It doesn't have to be right on the grid. I'm not too worried about that. One thing that you might want to consider is going through this, and remember with a pole banner in particular, you have to really think about how this thing is going to look, from multiple vantage points, okay, and from varying distances, okay. So, all the elements that you've created for your brand so far, patterns, icons, colors, type, imagery, etc., you want to make sure that they fit on what are essentially 8 different panels per banner, so they feel cohesive. They're readable, so any content you have, you don't want to go really small on your type. It's probably good to keep your typographic, any kind of written content pretty minimal. Really, you're just trying to create a vibe and set a tone for the experience that people were going to have. So think about what's going to work well and look at it from every vantage point, especially as you start to put your graphic elements up here. You want to make sure that it kind of flows well together, and especially when you have multiple banners, how are you using them? How are they oriented? How are the different panels oriented to create a sense of rhythm and variety, but also to be consistent? Okay, so something to think about. One thing I might want to do that's helpful is put a figure in here. Now you can go online and find OBJ file figures, which are dimensional figures. I'm going to just simply copy and paste my vector element here. I'm not worried about it being perfectly like creating a dimensional figure necessarily. I said I have a little custom document here, 4 by 6 inches. Make sure that because your dimension files are in 150, make sure you're consistent across all of your elements, that you're working in the same resolution, just so they're compatible and you don't have any size issues or any resolution issues. So 150, like we said, is fine for what we're doing. I'm just going to go ahead and create that file. It's an RGB file again, just to be sure. I'm going to paste the figure in there and just scale it down a little bit. Now I'm not worried here about making a perfectly dimensional figure. I just need to create an OBJ file so I'm able to bring it into dimension. Okay, so when I go to this first, the extrusion seems a little bit over the top. I don't need that. I can really just essentially make it to where it's fairly flat for my purpose. Okay, if I want to have a look and see what that looks like, I mean, that's not as wide as a human, but for our purposes, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to make sure that I go to my 3D and I'm going to export 3D layer. I'm going to create that OBJ file and I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save it wherever you want to save it. I'm putting it into my assets folder here. No, okay, I've got to rename it, of course. I'm going to name it human scale figure, so it's consistent with my other file, which is an AI file. And I'm going to go ahead and click out of there. Not going to worry about saving that step. And I can get out of there as well. I mean, sometimes you might want to actually go through and close your other programs, depending on how heavy things are on your computer. Now I have my OBJ file here with the human figure. I'm going to drag that figure in to my dimension file here. And she's giant. Okay, so I might go ahead and scale this down. And again, I'm not too worried about the, coming in huge. But what I'm going to do is because I'm using my inch to feet ratio here, I'm going to go ahead and make, say, 2 wide, 6 tall. Okay, so that was the original idea that I had there. So then when you start to see the figure in the space, it looks proportional to the size of the banners, okay? And again, remember in your deliverable sheet, all of your dimensions are spelled out for your pole panels and everything, okay? So now you can move the figure around in the space. I don't want to scale it. I was on the scale tool. I got to get off of that. I can move the figure around in the space, and to get a sense of how the proportion feels, from varying vantage points and distances. So, this isn't a totally necessary step right now in this phase. It's really just to get a sense of. I think it's very helpful to have a sense of scale and proportion when you're working in this dimensional context. Okay. So once you do that, and again, you can vary your vantage points here. Okay. And the other thing you can do, remember, you can always go into your environment and work with your lighting. You can change the rotation of the light, to vary in the space. You can go through and look at some preset lighting scenario environments, which we've talked about in a previous video. You can also put a background in here. You can bring a background image and just bring it right in. If you do that, I would say keep the image pretty neutral in that, like if you brought in a sky, for example, it's much easier if we brought in just a sky and then we changed our vantage point and we were looking at it, we wouldn't need the figure so much from that point. But if we changed our, let's do this here. If I got it to where I could be viewing it as if I was seeing it from down below, and I didn't have so much of the foreground in place, I can have a sky in there and essentially act as if I'm viewing it from the bottom, and the background is going to be easy for me to integrate the image into because of the fact that there's nothing in there that needs to align, like the grid doesn't need to align with anything if I'm just viewing it from the sky. So, in this case, this one would work better than this one's too, clearly in the distance. So I'm seeing the ground. So if I just stuck a sky background in here, it wouldn't work. I'd have to adjust my image accordingly to make that work, okay? Um, but I do think keeping your background as neutral as possible, unless if you do bring in an image that has, an environment and it has, buildings and things, that's great, but you'll just have to work a little bit extra to get your banners situated in a way that looks like it fits naturally. And all you have to do is you just pull a JPEG, again, make sure the resolution's the same. You can literally, grab your image and pull it into the file and it'll occupy the background, okay? So now that, if I have this set in here, what I'm going to do is I want to find a panel here and just get started. If I select this panel here, I'm going to go to, what am I doing here? I'm going to File, I'm going to go to Import, and I'm going to say Place Graphic on Model. And it's going to take me to my folder. Where do I have that? That's where I have that. All I've done is I've taken a banal panner. So you might have these set up as AI files, vector files. For me, I find it easier to pull it, grab a file, copy and paste it into Photoshop, crop it, make a JPEG out of it, and make sure the resolution and everything is the same. And then when you bring it in, it doesn't have all these separate elements to it that can be awkward to adjust. So all I'm going to do here is make sure that this adjusts onto my panel. And again, it's built to the same proportions, aspect ratio as the banner the banner panel. And I've just followed that for my deliverables list to make sure that I'm working with the right sizes. Okay, I could probably go in here and tweak that some more and get that fitting to where it looks a little better. And then I can see it from different angles, and once I get all my panels on there, it'll start to take shape. And then I can mess around again with the lighting, intensity, rotation, etc. And then do any specific customizations that are working best for your particular context. For your figures, again, you can go through and find OBJ figures online. I think it adds a little extra sense of detail if you pick figures that feel like they're going to be involved or actual audience of or participants in your type of event. Not a requirement by any means, but it's just something that helps give the context a little more of a specific feel. Because again, not every audience is going to be attracted to every event out there. So thinking about that is a good thing. And then you can really detail it out, like we said, with backgrounds, lighting variations, and have a lot of fun with it. So take your time, save consistently. Again, remember that we're only looking at this as a pretty raw preview. When this starts to render, it'll come together a lot more with a lot more detail. Okay. I think if there's any other things I want to mention to you here. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, so I think that's for the most part what I wanted to talk to you about. Now, when you're dealing with your banners and stuff, again, the file in the deliverable, the dimensions are basically it's much larger. It's 30 odd inches by whatever. Again, as long as you're just sizing it down proportionally, I always just divide things by 2, get it down to a size that's manageable, and as long as the proportion's right, the width and height, you're going to be able to bring it in and fit it into your panels with no problem. Again, just making sure that each panel flows and it feels cohesive and just makes sense together. Okay, that's just a quick tutorial. If you have any questions that are more specific on this, let me know, and I look forward to seeing the work. Take care.